A well-behaved woman is trim and proper. Chores always done, not a hair out of place. When the husband comes home, she greets him with a smile.
I'm sorry, what the fuck?
Are you tired of Hitler?
I feel no shame.
Okay, one liar as a kid can find another liar.
I want that stricken from the record.
How else is she gonna learn if she doesn't have a feather?
I could go fuck in the big house.
You're a mess, girl. I am here to audition for Babysitters Club extras. I brought my own hammer.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Well-Behaved Women. I am one of your co-hosts, Hannah, and today I'm here with our host, Miss Lauren. Hi, Lauren.
Hello. How's it going?
We're good. And so every week, as usual, she has a story about a notable woman from history. We already know this week who it is, though, because we are doing part 2 on Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Dun, dun, dun! She's lifting for any audio listeners, she's lifting our beloved Ruth Bader Ginsburg bobblehead. There
For
she
the
is.
cover art for this episode, I should just take a few pictures of her around.
Yeah.
And
Working around the house.
post that. Yeah,
And
we
then
can
don't
just
have to
post
say
that
image
as the-
credits. I can just say Lauren Chill for image credits.
Exactly.
You could even title. You could give it a fun title. Because the listeners know, or anybody who does see the titles, they know we love a fun title.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so when last we left Ruth, she had just finished presenting her oral arguments before the Supreme Court. She presented like 5 of them before the bench.
Okay.
And it's the mid-70s. She's dealing with cases that deal with gender discrimination. She's realizing that there's a lot of it around the country, both against men and against women. And so she's trying to take the steps to address that.
Yes. She's chipping away at the patriarchy.
Yep. So do you want to do an on this year in history?
All right, let me find it deep within my soul.
Deep within your soul.
On this year in history. Nah, that wasn't it.
I loved it.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, but I just didn't feel like it was. I
Try
didn't
it
give it my
again.
all. No,
Try again.
No, I don't want to. I'll take the take, but I'll try to keep working on it.
Air India Flight 855, a Boeing 747 passenger jet, crashes off the coast of Bombay, killing 213 people.
Which is so crazy to hear because we're just passing the 10-year anniversary of the flight, whatever, from Malaysia Airlines. And we're passing, and they had about 200 something people on there. It's insane. Oh my God. All right. Boeing has not had a great track record in the last few decades, huh?
No.
Yeah. All right.
But they're also like some of the only people that make it, so it doesn't matter. Film director Roman Polanski skips bail in the United States and he flees to France after pleading guilty to charges of engaging in sex with a 13-year-old girl.
God, I hate that. Yeah. Ding, ding.
Misogyny bell.
Ding, 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 diggity, ding, 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 ding.
Misogyny bell early this episode.
Not even misogyny, just creep. Disgusting pedophile creep predator.
The Egyptian raid on Larnaca International Airport. The Egyptian Special Forces attempt to rescue several hostages in Larnaca, Cyprus. 20 Egyptian commandos are either injured or killed.
Damn. I've never heard of that one.
Do you have any guesses or do you want one more?
Oh, I thought there was more. Okay. I'm just going to say 1975.
All right. It's 1978. So you were under.
Not terrible. At least I was under this time.
So it's 1978. Ruth has been teaching. She is still presenting. She kept up her work and her research, and she spent a year at Stanford as a postgraduate fellow, while Marty was teaching there as a visiting professor.
All right.
So she was able to, because she had tenure, she was able to kind of go back and forth and be a visiting professor at other places and then come back. So they were, and they were kind of considering a change of scene. They were enjoying California quite a bit.
Well, yeah, it doesn't snow like it does in Boston and all those places. They're probably having a nice little
temperate climate,
Yeah, daiquiri out at the beach, or they're going up to like the redwood forest. They're not having to deal with
the Bay Area, so it's more likely they're going up to the redwoods. Yeah.
All right. Well, they could drink on the beach in the Bay Area, right?
Yeah, of course. So she spent her time working on a book on litigation and her work in human rights, which kind of turned into a little bit of an autobiography of sorts. But it also, like, while some of these cases were fresh in her mind, it was a way for her to process through her thoughts on them.
Okay, yeah. Well, yeah, because she's working, she's studying, she's researching, she's
yeah, she should be able to process her thoughts on how the cases went out. Marty had just been hired as a visiting professor, and Ruth decided to take the time to work with their behavioral sciences department. She was also working on a book of her cases, and she had an account firsthand of her advocacy for equal rights and litigation in the courtroom. Marty was considering leaving the firm he'd been at for a long time because he was really enjoying life at Stanford as a professor. And he was also being offered tenure there, which we all know is a big deal. Again,
tenure.
I got tenure. Yes.
Tenure.
News. Elsewhere in the courts system.
All right.
President Jimmy Carter had been elected a couple years earlier, and he had quite a few campaign promises that he needed to fulfill. One of them was a pledge to create more judgeships around the country to help with the backlog of all the cases that were piling up. Part of that promise that he made specifically was to hire people of color and to hire more women. And at the time, and even now, a path to federal judgeship can be as easy as knowing the right person to assign you to that seat. For bankruptcy judges, you need to prove by statute that you had a law degree. For magistrate judges, they need to have been a member of the bar for 5 years. But outside of that, you could just pluck someone off the street and say, you're a federal judge now.
That's dumb.
Isn't that crazy? Yeah.
That's the dumbest thing in the world.
They wouldn't be good at it, but yeah. I mean, and I'm pretty sure there were a couple dumbass judges that got assigned under some presidency specifically because of that.
Puppets, like puppet judges, essentially, that like worked for a special interest group, a mob, things like that. That is way too easy to corrupt.
So with all the new positions to fill, they basically released a series of questionnaires. And if you were interested in a specific seat, you filled out a questionnaire for that district.
Okay.
Ruth and Marty are over in California. They're wrapping their time up. And Marty just suggested, he was like, you should fill one of these things out. And she's like, sure, whatever. So she filled out 3 like different applications in the beginning of 1979. So from there, she continues on with her work at ACLU and at Columbia. She's still a professor there. And in 1980, a judge in the DC District Court died, and they vacated a seat that needed to be filled.
And they picked up Ruth's application.
Yes,
it was shining with a holy golden aura.
Yeah.
Other letters.
Exactly. 2 months later, so President Carter nominated Ruth for the seat in April of 1980, and 2 months later, she was confirmed in front of the full Senate, and she received her commission that same day.
All right.
Just like that, Ruth was a judge.
Okay. Good for her. It's her who got that seat because it started everything.
Yeah. I mean, it didn't start everything, but she got to be in a position where she could help like direct those decisions.
Yeah, I guess what I was thinking instead of started it all, but I guess I was thinking like it's the turn in her career that really led to the woman we know today.
Yes, very much so.
Thank you.
And when they appointed her, she had received the highest possible rating, which is, quote, exceptionally well qualified.
Yeah, the highest. Do you know how often it is people get that?
I don't know anymore.
Well, I imagine not
think at the time it probably wasn't that common. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. So again, just another little qualification for our girl here.
Feather in her cap. Yep.
Yeah. Another one of those mother of laws or mother of women's rights, queen of the everyone. I couldn't think of anything.
On the bench, she worked closely with conservative judges, making sure to be as measured as possible with her words and taking a moderate stance on pretty much everything that she could. She wanted to be middle of the line, not sway one side or the other.
Right. Not that she doesn't play favorites here.
Now, I'm sure people now will say that she was a leftist, but she was really midline. She tried to be a fair judge to the best of her ability, and that came from being a civil rights lawyer. Now, there are decisions that she made that you and I today would not agree with. And like, she's not perfect. She made decisions that were of the time and for the time, but she tried. She was known for being a moderate and cautious jurist. She made sure that when she agreed or dissented, she was able to fully express why.
Okay, good.
In a very girly turn, Ruth noticed that the judges' robes were less than accommodating to a typical female outfit.
Okay, are they different from the robes we know today then?
No, they're the same robes, but they were not very flattering for like the type of suits and like business dress that women had to wear at the time. Like they had all this stuff for men, but it was designed to go up under a men's collar of like his shirt.
And women's collars didn't do the same thing?
Well, they wouldn't be given collars, or like they'd have different types of tops on, and so they would just sit awkwardly. It just wasn't helpful. So she began to wear these things called jabots, which are the collars that you wear over the robes. She kept them, kind of kept that neckline a little more controlled.
Her doily thing.
Her doily thing.
That's what I always thought it was. I was always like, she's always got like a little doily under here, but it's called a jabot?
Yes.
Are we sure that
it is? Yeah, it actually has a name.
Oh, wow.
And over the years, she began to collect them.
It became her signature.
So for the next
became a fashion icon.
Yes, it is. It's absolutely. Well, this was before she would. I mean, this was like she was doing this before it was cool, and this was back when she was like first doing it. But that was when she was district judge. So she's been doing it far before her Supreme Court days.
Somebody had to start the trend, and here we are.
I think other people may have had it. I'm sure that wasn't like. I'm sure it wasn't like she invented the thing, but she started doing that as a common practice. Yeah, exactly.
And it is very distinctly her. If I see any random judge with that, I'm immediately going to think RBG.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. For the next 13 years, Ruth was a district judge. Now, I fucking tried to find the cases that she worked on as a DC appellate judge. And everyone is excited about all the cases from the Supremes, but nobody cared about these DC appeals cases. So I was able to get my hands on 2 of her cases when she was a DC appellate judge.
I know. I'm just going to say congrats on finding them, though.
I fucking tried, man. So the first was in 1990, and that's about a case about the DC prison system. Because DC is a district and not a state, the overcrowded and underfunded prison system wanted to shut down. Nothing explains the gist better than the text itself, so here it is. Quote, prisoners convicted in the district are committed, quote, to the custody of the Attorney General of the United States, end quote. The Attorney General is authorized to assign prisoners to, quote, any available, suitable, and appropriate institutions. After the District of Columbia government closed the doors of its overcrowded prisons, the United States sued to enjoin the district from refusing to accept prisoners designated by the Attorney General to the DC Department of Corrections. The district court held, in essence, that the district was entitled to close its prison doors only if accepting additional prisoners would violate the Constitution or judicial orders setting prison population limits. Furthermore, closure would be lawful only when authorized by a court after a hearing. Basically, you can't just shut down a prison. You have to be able to show like why you're shutting down and where these people are going to go afterwards.
Okay. I mean, it seems to make sense. Yes.
I think it had to do with like one of the prisons was a women's prison, and suddenly the women didn't have anywhere to go.
Yeah. Which is
Ruth is the author. Yes, exactly. Ruth, as the author of the opinion, affirmed the lower court decision that the district had no right to shut down their prisons when the prisoners have no place to go and cannot do so unilaterally without having a hearing. Another case, and I loved this one. So she wrote a case about the koosh balls, The lovable, laughable ball.
Toys.
Remember the koosh balls?
Of course I do.
The smell of the koosh ball.
Yes, I do remember that smell and the feeling, the cushiness of it.
We're having a very millennial moment. But yeah, the 1,000 little spindly finger things.
Oh my God, we had a great childhood.
Quote, the koosh ball is a patented, trademarked product formed of hundreds of floppy, wiggly, elastomeric filaments radiating from a core. Originally developed to teach youngsters with poor eye-to-hand coordination how to play catch, the koosh ball has a soft, snuggly feel and is easily grasped if it contacts any portion of a person's hand.
Okay, yes, that's an accurate description of said toy, although I did not know it was made originally for improving hand-eye coordination.
Yeah, it was easy for kids to grab because maybe they didn't have hands big enough for like a big ball, but they can grab, even if they get like a couple of the strands. Yeah, if they close their hand and they can get 2 or 3 of them, you can catch them, you know?
You've caught it by like 1 or 2 at a time, sure. And you're like,
exactly.
Just like,
and especially when it's being thrown hard. Yeah, if it's being thrown hard and you only catch it by 2 or 3, it's gonna kind of go down and then whip back right up at your hand. We've all been there.
Yeah. So they had a case.
So Koosh tried to copyright the design. They so that competitors couldn't produce cheap knockoff brands and like imported them.
Koosh isn't cheap.
What?
I'm kidding. I was just like, wait, Koosh wasn't the cheap version?
No, it wasn't. That was that was the version.
I can't remember what I had.
The original case basically said the Copyright Office had every right to deny them that copyright, as the design was essential to the functionality of the product.
Okay.
So the product company is named Odds On. So Odds On Products, who are the makers of Koosh, they were not happy with this, so they appealed the decision. But the appeals court held the lower court's ruling. They didn't have any basis to claim copyright on this article. This episode, we're going to go into so many court cases, guys. So it's going to get fine.
I do I listened to a podcast that just sadly ended called Let's Go to Court. So they would literally just sit down and go over a bunch of court cases, whether they're like I
find court cases fascinating. The more I read about it, I'm like, ooh, this is good. There's a lot of little details that really make the thing important.
And that's what's fascinating. So yes, I'm ready.
So, but those 2 cases, those are pretty much what I know about her time on the appeals court. In 1993, Bill Clinton was president, and he had run on a platform of, quote, moderate liberalism.
Yeah.
And he really did want to work across the aisle to get shit done. He's actually famous for that. He did a really good job of reaching across the aisle and trying to get moderate things done for the nation. In the spring of that same year, Byron White, who was an associate justice on the Supreme Court, decided that he was going to retire. An announcement was made. The news got out that Bill was looking for someone to fill the seat that would help diversify the bench.
All right.
No less than 7 of Ruth's colleagues and peers wrote to the White House to recommend Ruth to the bench. Quote, this letter is to convey my strong support for the nomination of Judge Ruth Bader Ginsburg to the United States Supreme Court, and to challenge recent statements in the media that have suggested that her nomination would not be widely or enthusiastically supported by women. Ruth Ginsburg almost single-handedly moved the Supreme Court in the 1970s to first acknowledge and then to repudiate discrimination against women. Simultaneously, she was a pioneer in opening the closed ranks of the faculties of the leading law schools in this country to women. Her courage, her judgment, and her outstanding legal skills have inspired a generation of lawyers. When I prepared the first edition of my family law casebook 15 years ago, Ruth Ginsburg's piece on gender and the Constitution was the obvious candidate to present the field to law students. Its power is only stronger today because Judge Ginsburg's leadership and accomplishments continue to inspire students and faculty alike. I urge you to nominate her to the court. She is superbly qualified for the position, and her selection will be hailed by women around the country. That was Judith Areen.
Love it. It's very high praise, but very well deserved because it's true.
We're going to go through a few of these.
Excellent. Okay.
To really hammer home this point. So the next person is Gerald Gunther. We've heard about him before. He was the guy that forced the judge's hand way back in New York City to take her on as a clerk. He was like, if you don't do this, right, I will never recommend another person.
That's right. That's right.
So he says to President Clinton, quote, as you know, it was during that decade during which she played a leading role that most of the modern laws of gender discrimination was established. She attained her goals not by flamboyant emotionalism, but by the most extraordinary, lawyer-like, persuasive performance before the court. During those years, I occasionally consulted with her about this naughty problem or that arose in the course of the case. And she was usually the first to see the problem, and she was brilliant in fashioning persuasive arguments to overcome each obstacle. To this, admiringly of her contribution every time I teach my constitutional law class.
She's textbook.
He also said, Ginsburg, as her entire career shows, is also characteristically sympathetic to the fact that the disputes before her involve human beings, and that the court's rulings have an impact upon human beings. One would expect no less in a person who is herself a splendid human being, who has managed to integrate with great skill her roles as a lawyer and judge, as well as a wife and mother. She knows that above all, her task is to apply the law in accordance with the intent of those who have the authority to enact it, and to make law herself only interstitially. In short, in my view, Ruth Ginsburg combines to an extraordinary degree the qualities of superb analytical ability, capacity for leadership, proven success in consensus building, and deep-seated faithfulness to the law that I would hope you would consider essential in a justice of the United States Supreme Court. I know I speak for many in the profession, legal academics, as well as practitioners, who would be deeply gratified if you were to accord her the most earnest and serious consideration of the appointment. Herma Hill Kay said, quite literally, it was Ruth Ginsburg's voice raised in oral argument before the United States Supreme Court that opened new opportunities for women of this country. Patricia King said her life's work, her values, and everything as she has ever stood for demonstrate a special commitment to women. She surely holds to the ideal that women should control their own destiny, including control over reproductive decision-making. She has been criticized by some for views expressed in her Madison lecture that perhaps the Supreme Court's decision in Roe v. Wade was more sweeping than it needed to be to strike down the Texas anti-abortion statute. That is not a radical position. It was held by many who held a pro-choice views at that time, who saw flaws in the opinion and who thought that a narrower opinion supplemented by state legislative strategies might have yielded better results for women with less division in the nation. In terms of her ability, temperament, capacity to relate to colleagues of various views, and her stature among the judiciary, Judge Ginsburg's appointment would do much to increase the respect for the Supreme Court. That was Gerhard Casper. To make a short story long,
she had references, baby.
She got references, and she was highly qualified, and she had some major law figures go to the mat for her. Bill heard them, and then even Janet Reno suggested her.
Now remind me, Janet Reno.
Janet Reno was a major cabinet member in Bill's presidency. I think she was like Secretary of Defense, or she was some intelligence person, and had a lot to do with like the ATF and the DEA in the 90s.
Okay. I remember
FBI.
hearing the name. I know I've
maybe
heard
she
it
was
before.
The FBI. You know what? Let's just fix this right now. Janet.
Go to Google.
This is it. She wasn't in charge of such. She was the former United States Attorney General.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Go girl. Maybe another person we look at someday in the future.
So that's why she dealt with a lot of different divisions in the United States government, because she had to deal with their cases and stuff. Anyway, Janet Reno suggested her. In June, he nominated Ruth, and that got the ball rolling with all of the background crap that you've got to do to be considered by the Senate.
Yep, and there's a hearing and all that.
So she checked two different boxes for Clinton. She was a woman, if she got on, she would only be the second woman ever on the Supreme Court. At the time, there was only Sandra. And the second was that she was Jewish. The last Jewish judge had been in 1969. So it was well past time. We got to get that representation back in there.
Gotcha.
Her confirmation hearings began, and in the many, many questions asked to her, she was as measured with her responses as was tradition for Ginsburg. She's pretty open about her views on the constitutional right to privacy and gender issues because she'd been working in those fields for decades.
Mm-hmm. She knows
all
about it.
Yeah. There were also a number of questions thrown at her that she refused to answer on the basis that those issues might come in front of her on the bench and she might have to vote on them eventually. I don't know if you remember Amy Coney Barrett's hearing, but that was one of the things that she said was, I want to stay uninformed so that if I have to have a decision,
I guess she wanted to
try to reduce confirmation bias, I guess. Because I get that, and I can respect that decision, but maybe a different wording would have been better. You maybe want to pick up a thesaurus and just kind of thumb through synonyms for uninformed. I want to remain unbiased, maybe would have been better.
For sure.
Yeah.
But for Ruth, this was the very first time that it hadn't been done before. It was controversial. You can't just not say how you feel on a topic.
Right.
And not just that, but she was a lady, and they couldn't even persuade a woman to give opinions on women's issues in this confirmation hearing, right?
Yeah.
It's really frustrating. Why don't you answer the question?
Because women can have
very different ideas about it, and I don't want to set a precedent.
Exactly.
Really?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay, I'm in the ballpark.
I'll take it.
Nevertheless, she persisted.
Ruth persisted.
She never did stop. Ruth persisted.
We'll come up with lyrics
for the Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I feel like she should get the Hamilton treatment.
Someone should have written a musical on her by now, for sure.
I feel like historical
musicals are just going to be absolutely a thing again.
People need to have a lot more like musical prowess than I do and lyrical prowess than I do, because I could not think of like a rhyming scheme for an entire history of law. Like,
I couldn't
holy shit,
come up with something
like completely original, but I could definitely Weird Al some stuff and try.
Yeah, there you go. We could Weird Al some shit.
Do like
a parody version of stuff.
All right. So
she's not taking a stance on these women's issues in the hearing, and it's controversial.
Yes. But she still was overwhelmingly approved, and she got confirmed by a 96-3 vote in August. She received her commission and was sworn in a week later.
I guess I expected
more of a fight.
I guess things weren't so
polarized even in the 90s.
They really weren't. They weren't so polarized. We have learned to normalize extremism in the politics that we're seeing, because people that are just trying to exist in the middle are seen as extreme leftists, and then people that are definitely extreme right-wing people are normalized on TV because their fucking party leader is literally allowed to get away with crime all the time. And over and over and over again.
To be moderate.
It's almost like it's
reversed now. It's like weird and extreme and not normal to be moderate.
If you look at you're exactly right. If you look at like a political spectrum kind of chart of like where most actual socialist tax-paying European type countries are, like, sorry, I'm doing left for your thing. So like that's left, right? And like their far extreme rights are probably somewhere here in the moderate to left area. Like, oh my God, it's crazy. They're crazy right-wing people because they're racist, right? As far left people in the United States, we can hope to get maybe to here, because we're fighting this. We're fighting all the way over on the far right because we have let it fester and fester. I've told you about this Nazi book that I've been reading.
Mhm.
I've been marking pages that are like, oh, this
That sounds
exact,
familiar.
like this thing is happening. They're allowing
Yeah.
this thing to happen. They're minimizing this thing. And
Mhm.
it's step by step by
History
step.
is
It's small
repeating.
allowances that allow this hatred and fucking terrible, terrible shit to fester and grow until it takes over. Anyway, I digress.
Yeah, I know.
We just wanted to vent because we were just thinking about a time where it was definitely tense. I mean, the nation was for sure divided.
But like, we didn't have politicians screaming on the floor. The State of the Union wasn't an interesting thing. It was about economics. It was about the latest, questions that you're having for the bills that are being passed. It's basically keeping everybody up on like, this is what's going on. It's not the speech of the year by the new president that's basically the antithesis, not even the antithesis, just the lesser of two evils in a fucking right to maybe center world of politics.
Yeah.
We're fine.
Yeah.
Everybody's fine. It's fine.
We're good. It's good.
We're okay.
I think.
So we come to the portion of the show where most people are familiar with her work and her cases. She's now on the Supreme Court bench. She's got her little doilies, her little jabbets, and she becomes Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Supreme Court Justice.
Remind me where Bader
Comes from in her name.
That's her maiden name.
Okay,
Bader.
I was thinking it
It was a hyphenated, but I wanted to make sure. Okay, so her maiden name. So yes, RBG, the notorious RBG, has arrived.
She's not notorious yet, but she is in the building.
She's doing the stuff that
starts to make her the notorious, like the big name that she is. We're starting
that phase of her life.
And for the sake of your sanity, as well as mine, and to try and maintain the sanity of our very small audience, I'm not going to go through every case that she wrote opinions for, because there were over 450 while she was on the Supremes.
On the Supremes!
That's what we're going to call it from now on, the Supremes.
I love it.
When she gets on the bench, she's on part of the Supremes.
Love it.
It would take way too much time to go through all of these opinions, whether they're concurring or dissenting, but we'd be calling it Word with Ginsburg, and that whole show would last way longer than Well-Behaved Women would.
I was going to say, we'd be like
84, 5.
Exactly.
By the time we got finished going into it with all of our tangents.
But I do want to talk about some of them because they're either ones that we've heard about or the names of the players. And they won't be in any particular order because I'm not going to deal with that nonsense. Right?
You're like, I'm not doing a timeline
right now.
So this the first case we're going to talk about was decades in the making. It was called Exxon Shipping Company v. Baker. The facts of the case.
I think oil
company. Is this spelled differently?
Yes. No, it's exactly that. Exxon Shipping and Exxon Oil are this one and the same.
Oh, okay.
Well, in this case, yes.
All right. So Exxon Shipping
versus in this corner,
Baker.
The Baker
down the street.
The facts of the case briefly are this. So Captain Joseph Hazelwood was a captain at Exxon who had recently completed an inpatient rehab program for alcoholism. In the weeks following his release, he dropped out of the follow-up programs and the AA meetings. He was witnessed at bars, parking lots, apartments, airports, airplanes, restaurants, hotels, ports all over, and even aboard the Exxon tankers.
He's just out there. My God, he just
decided to go party.
On the night of March 23rd, 1989, before he captained a tanker out of port on the Alaska coast, Hazelwood was witnessed at a bar near the port, downing at least 5 double vodkas, or about 15 ounces of 80 proof alcohol.
Ooh.
For an amount that this is an amount that for any non-alcoholic would have knocked them out cold for hours.
Killed them.
Completely.
Could have potentially, I mean,
probably killed them. Yeah. Could have knocked them out. Could have killed
seriously
them. Definitely needed their stomach pumped.
Yes.
and all of that shit.
They needed medical attention.
Regardless.
But Hazelwood, being the heavy drinker that he was, he left the bar and he boarded the tanker, which was loaded with 53 million gallons of crude oil.
He drove an oil tanker.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been
confident in my ability to hold my small amount of liquor when I used to drink, but I never was like, I'm going to operate like not just like a car, which is obscenely ridiculous enough, but a full-blown 55,000 gallon.
I'm fine. That's fine. Let's do this.
I do
this every day.
Literally,
yeah, that makes me feel better,
job.
Jim.
He did this every day and he felt confident about his ability to do it.
Wow. Well, he
is overestimating himself.
So he takes off. They take off around 9 p.m. on the 23rd of March.
At night?
What?
He can't even see that well.
That was when the ship off was scheduled.
Right,
so
but I mean, like,
and he's drunk and now it's dark. You need to be able to see well.
Let me just get through this.
I'm sorry.
I know we're going to talk about it because it is bad.
No,
Let me just get through this because we're already railing on exactly what the case is.
All right.
You get it. You see it. You see the problem.
Thank you.
See it
coming.
I'm sorry.
So they take off around 9 p.m. on the 23rd, and a little tugboat pulls them out far enough so that they can get going under their own power. And they're in this strait, which means it's really important to stay in your own little lane or in a very specific spot of the Narrows, lest you run aground on either side.
Mm-hmm.
At about 11:20 p.m. is when Hazelwood takes active control of the ship. So the tugboat leaves, Hazelwood's on it. They confirm this.
Yeah.
And he commands where it goes in these Narrows. They're called the Valdez Narrows.
Okay.
He is one of two officers in the control room, and he's the only one trained properly to get out of this specific Narrows, which was apparently a very tricky one. He radios the Coast Guard that his outbound lane is all iced up, so he's asking permission to move over into the incoming lane. This was a fairly common practice. They granted this, and the procedure to move on, to move back when the path was clear, everyone knew how this worked. So basically, he made the request. They were like, sure, go ahead. So they're in the incoming lane, and that presents a different set of issues, which the officers are also aware of, because there is this reef off of the coast. It's called the Bly Reef. Mm-hmm. And it was directly in their path, and it necessitated a further reroute back into the outbound lane.
Okay.
Out of nowhere, and seemingly for no reason, Hazelwood left the deck and he went down to his quarters. And he did this about 5 minutes before they reached the reef.
Okay.
Quote, as Hazelwood left, he instructed the remaining officer, third mate Joseph Cousins, to move the tanker back into the shipping lane once it became a beam of Busby light.
Poetic.
Cousins, unlicensed to navigate in those waters, was left alone with helmsman Robert Kagan, a non-officer. For reasons that remain a mystery, they failed to make the turn at Busby Light, and a later emergency maneuver attempted by Cousins came too late. The tanker ran aground on Bly Reef, tearing the hole open and spilling 11 million gallons of crude oil into the Prince William Sound.
Oh, wait. You said 11 million gallons?
11 million gallons into the Prince William Sound.
I thought you
said small sound.
I thought you said the tanker had 55,000 gallons. It was 55 million.
They had 53 million on board, and 11 million of it went into the ocean.
Oh my
God, no.
And it went into a very, very small Narrows with a really
fragile
ecosystems.
Yes, fragile
ecosystem.
The coral ecosystem. There was thank you. The coral reef. There was a very important ecosystem right there. Yes. Oil all in it,
and it's right there in the
most fragile and most delicate of ecosystems. My God.
In a very, very busy shipping Narrows where there are tankers coming in and out of there all the time, probably a couple at a time. They have all of this process. It's a daily business. So this is a big deal.
Can I just say,
on behalf of Exxon, our bad.
So Hazelwood comes back up. He tries and fails to get the tanker off the reef. That ended up being kind of a good thing because it, like, had it gotten unplugged from the reef, more oil would have spilled and the ship would have sunk to the bottom of the Narrows. It never would have been able to fix it.
I guess. Yeah.
It's like if you get stabbed, you keep the knife in the stab wound.
Yeah,
you don't pull it out.
Prevent bleeding. You put pressure on the wound.
Yes.
Oh my
Goodness. So I guess how did they get out of this?
So they had to clean it up, obviously. So in the years following, Exxon was charged with punitive damages in the amount of about $2.1 billion.
Ooh, in the 70s or wait.
What? This is in the 90s.
This was in the 90s, yeah.
Still pretty damn
expensive for the 90s.
Hold on. That was 1989 when it happened. And so in the following years, yeah, which is still a big deal. And this not only dealt with the extremely costly cleanup of the oil spill itself, but it had to deal with the lost wages of the entire area of Alaska that relied on that Narrows as their livelihood from that area. Fishermen, but also like shippers and stuff, people that needed to use that port that couldn't for a really long time. Other products that had to be shipped in and out of there. So the case went to the Supreme Court because Exxon decided they didn't want to pay the $2.1 million. They were like, that seems a little steep. They were like,
$2.1 billion. I don't have that. I don't have that right now.
That seems a little too much. I don't feel like it. And unsurprisingly, the court sided with the corporation and lessened the damages down to a 1-to-1 ratio of punitive damages versus compensatory damages. They felt it was a fair upper limit for the payout.
Rude.
That's the environment.
That's all the lives
lost, all the fish dead, the coral can't regenerate.
Yep. So Alito sat out for part of this ruling because he owned Exxon stock at the time. Probably still does.
Okay, yeah. I would be surprised.
From Oye, I'm going to call it Oye because it's OYEZ.
Okay.
So that's the site that I got most of the summaries from these cases, and it's a really good resource if you just need the basics of a case. Justia is another great resource as well because you can get the entire opinion, and then you can listen to the whole thing if you want to. Anyway, so for this specific case, the court split evenly 4-4 on the issue of whether judges may award punitive damage against a company for employee misdeeds. Therefore, the court left the Ninth Circuit's ruling that can be undisturbed, but noted that this affirmation could not be used as a precedent because it merely reflected an even split in the court. On the second issue, which Alito did vote in, a 5-4 majority held that the judges are free to create remedies in maritime cases where Congress has not legislated in the area already. But the freedom can be lost if Congress passes legislation restraining such judicial activism. So David Souter delivered the opinion of the court, and Antonin Scalia, joined by Clarence Thomas, wrote a concurring opinion, agreeing with the court's application of punitive damages precedent, but arguing that these prior holdings were in error. John Paul Stevens concurred in part and dissented in part, stating Congress, not the courts, should be the sole body entrusted with determining the permissibility of punitive damages. And then Breyer concurred in part and dissented in part, arguing the punitive damages in this case should have just been reduced.
News.
Yeah, we got into the law real heavy just then.
I know the
legal jargon. I'm always like 3 sentences behind you, trying to like, okay, so this means this, and so if that and this, yeah. It was
basically
like that
they sided
meme.
They sided with the company and said, yeah, that's a little too much for you to pay, and no surprise there. Doesn't matter.
Shocker.
But for now, we're going to do a elsewhere in Ruth's life. Honey, the news about Ruth is on.
Ruth daily.
When Ruth joined the bench, she and other members of the court developed long-standing relationships. To a certain extent, you kind of have to get along with the people that you work with, right?
Yeah. I mean,
so
cordiality
at the very least.
Yes. And the Ginsburgs as a couple, they were no exception. Marty was more than happy to join the spouses supreme,
Yeah.
and he found that he and Maureen Scalia both loved cooking, so they would like cook dinners together.
Uh-oh.
No, like as people, like as
Like
couples,
double dates.
like double dates, or like just as groups,
They would do the cooking
as the Supremes, whatever.
I see.
But she worked to develop like good relationships with her fellow jurists.
I was gonna say I was
about to pop Marty a new one.
No. It was like that helped her be able to like host at their house because she wasn't going to cook.
Yeah, no,
the kids
not doing that.
The kids were well grown by this time, so Jane grew up to be an attorney like her parents before her. She still is. She's still active. And James grew up to be a music producer. He went to law school for like 2 years, less than 2 years, and he realized that wasn't like the life for him. So he is now into producing classical records.
I can't read these
law books. I've got this sick beat in my head. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I'm seeing too many notes.
He's like tapping on
his law books, just like, man, I could really do something with that.
In 1999, Ruth was diagnosed with colon cancer.
Oh,
that's aggressive.
Yeah. She was 66 at the time. It was devastating, but having that sweet, sweet, sweet government health care, she was able to get treatment for it, and she went into remission.
Woo!
Woo!
We love remission.
My mission is to get into remission.
Not me, as Ruth. I'm
as far as I know,
Bravo.
cancer free.
Tiny clap. Thanks.
Thank you.
I worked hard on that.
I'll do a little golf clap for you. That was good. So I forgot to mention during the Sandra Day O'Connor episodes, she was also diagnosed with breast cancer in 1988, and she would schedule her chemo on like Fridays so that she wouldn't miss work. She'd be able to have the weekends to kind of recover. And she also wore a wig so that nobody would see her losing her hair.
Yeah, Jen, that's
how you would like to appear? Go for it.
I mean, she had, we saw pictures of her. She definitely had her hairstyle that she liked.
I think it was
very much a calling card. You know, it was very much that's how we knew Amy Coney Barrett at that time, was that hairstyle.
Obviously she's a justice, but
I'm save me. Tell me to shut up. Let's go. Move to the next.
Oh, I was talking about Sandra Day O'Connor and her hair.
Yeah, I know, I was too.
And then I got lost. And then
well, you said Amy Coney Barrett, so I got confused.
Oh, what's wrong with me?
I thought I said Sandra.
Oh.
But I think you're right. I think at a certain point, like even here, we see the back of Bobble Ginsburg's head, and that's a specific hairstyle that she had until the end.
Oh my God.
People get to be known by their hairstyles sometimes.
Yeah, they're icons
in that way. But also the fact you should definitely name that bobblehead Ruth Bobble Ginsburg.
I already did. That's why I said Bobble Ginsburg. No, this is nobody, because since this is an audio medium, I should mention I have with me, it was gifted to me a few years ago, a bobblehead Ruth Ginsburg. And so her name affectionately is Ruth Bobble Ginsburg, and she has joined us for this episode. And so every once in a while I shake Bobble Ginsburg's head at Hannah to remind her that we're persisting. We're moving on.
We're persisting. No, yeah, she's presiding over the episode, if you will.
So neither of these justices that had cancer missed cases because of some silly thing that's trying to eat your insides and kill you slowly.
That's not going to stop
me from doing my job.
Nah. Ruth, for her part, never missed a day of court.
That sounds like Ruth.
She was weakened a lot by her chemo. So she started working with a personal trainer. She hired an ex-Special Forces reservist as a personal trainer, a man named Bryant Johnson.
I can't believe
I forgot this. Ruth was also a fit badass.
Yeah. This was what happened, because she was just kind of a skinny bitch, and then she's not a bitch, but she's like that bitch, right?
Yeah.
She was a teeny tiny woman, and she was like nearly killed by cancer. And so in order to try and help get better, Bryant Johnson came in and he started training with her, and that just continued on.
Perfect.
Now we all know what to do.
They worked together in a justices only gym. It was it's the most exclusive gym in the nation.
My God.
And only the Supreme Court justices can use it. Can the president use it?
No. I mean, I know he has
His
his
own gym.
The president has his own gym.
I know, so he has
To get a guest pass from a Supreme Court justice to go.
He's not going to work out with the justices.
You don't know. Maybe
He's good friends with one of them.
Nobody wants to smell Clarence Thomas after he's been on a treadmill.
well, maybe.
You just go when Clarence isn't there.
I actually doubt that he
Yeah.
shows up to the gym himself much anymore.
I doubt it. I really
Anyway,
doubt it.
we're moving on. We're getting distracted by the justices
Sorry,
only
he's
gym.
He's
that
busy
he posts.
keeping a lid on his wife, Ginny. She's causing lots of problems for him.
Traitor,
Yes.
insurrectionist Jenny.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Ginny. Yes.
Ginny.
Yeah, insurrection.
And is Ginny.
When Justice O'Connor retired, Ruth found herself as the only woman on the bench again. And again, like Sandra, I can imagine that was really lonely. She was the only woman deciding so many cases in the early 2000s that affected the lives of women who were by this time very vocal in the political world.
Yeah.
It must have been kind of hard for her to just be back being alone on a bench with eight dudes.
Yeah, you feel like you're up
Against all of them.
All right, enough of that personal nonsense. Back to law. So there were some cases that weren't so dense. The decisions were really easy to come to for the whole bench. This
Love
happened
those.
with Metro Goldwyn Mayer versus Grokster. Grokster allowed file sharing without a central server, and it allowed people to distribute potentially copyrighted material illegally. And for some fucking reason, the original court found for Grokster, saying they could have obtained permission, and this could have been sharing files legally. And the Supremes were like, no, this is a massive violation of copyright.
Yeah.
I'm gonna deal with this. Nah, fuck that.
Just a
Grokster, because I immediately think Napster, because they had a big court case too.
They also had a big court case, but Grokster is a different company.
It is.
I
This is
think
like
movies more.
Before?
I don't remember. You can look it up.
No.
Metro Goldwyn Mayer versus Grokster.
That's true.
Oh, cite that source again.
Another easy case was Halliburton v. Erica P. John Fund.
Mhm.
So the former shareholders of Halliburton cried fraud, and Halliburton said, no, you guys can't be a class just because you all used to be shareholders and we had a couple bad years. You can't do that. That's not a class. And it was more obviously like complicated than that. There was probably a lot of shady shit going on, but they got to the Supreme Court and the bench was presented with the question, may Halliburton challenge the class certification of its former shareholders by introducing evidence that the alleged fraud did not impact the price of the stock. So basically, even if the fraud occurred, if it didn't impact the price of the stock,
That they can't
get upset.
Does it matter? Does it actually matter? And the court unanimously decided for Halliburton, saying, there's no reason to, quote, there is no reason to prevent defendants in a securities fraud case from presenting evidence regarding the impact of alleged misinformation on stock prices during the class certification stage.
Okay.
I'm confused how they reached that decision, but I guess I shouldn't be so.
You can't name potential fraud if you're trying to figure out how much you think you're owed, just because they had a couple bad years. You can't just.
They have to have the documents first.
Basically, it was like if the fraud hadn't happened, would that have actually affected the stock price? If the things that you're saying actually happened, did that matter in the bottom line, or was that just paperwork or something that was being a fraud? Is it programming that was a little illegal, or is it watching people, or is it
did you lose money
and you're upset?
Did their stock price skyrocket after they did this fraud? Is that what caused this issue? And they said, we can't. Halliburton can't control the price of their stocks.
I guess that would be true.
Okay. All right. That part. So they were saying I was a little confused because again, it's Hannah versus legal jargon. The next big Supreme case out there is me versus legal jargon. So, so you're saying basically that the shareholders or former shareholders said that price skyrocketed after.
You know, I
I
don't
don't think it really matters if I get the case.
Basically, it was
Listeners understand.
the listeners understand that the Supremes sided with a corporation.
and I
Yeah.
can understand
And that too, I'm with you.
There we go. Other cases are not going to be so simple.
Oh fuck,
And that wasn't even a hard one.
So Ruth held her opinions throughout her career, and she was really faithful to her stances. All right, so the case of Whole Women's Health versus Hellerstedt. The state of Texas tried to make this bullshit rule about what the classification was of offices where abortions were provided and like how they registered in certain ways. I don't understand all of it, but basically it was making abortion providers go above and beyond what they had to, what they like were designed to do, and turn them into like mini hospitals. The case got to the Supreme Court, and in a 5-3 decision, the bench decided for Whole Women's Health, saying the Texas bill was unconstitutional because it placed an undue burden on women seeking abortions. Basically, there were women that were having to travel a long way to go to specific hospitals that could provide abortive care. But there were smaller women's clinics that could still do that. But if they had to deal with these laws, they wouldn't be able to classify themselves as being like, unless they made major changes to their business, they wouldn't be able to classify themselves enough to provide that abortive care.
Okay.
And she said, no, that's making it way too hard for women to actually get access to abortions. You can't do that.
Yeah,
I agree with Ruth.
Good. You should.
I know.
Women should have access to abortive care.
And they're,
Be able to have the autonomy and own their own bodies and be able to make their own decisions about what happens to that body.
And think about Texas right now. What is it like? Literally in the 6 figures of pregnancies due to sexual assaults and rapes.
And not to mention infant mortality
since Roe v.
rate
Wade
goes
has
up.
been overturned. Yeah. That's fucking crazy.
There was a story
About a poor woman who knew pretty much the long term knew that she was going to deliver a stillborn baby.
She was at State of the Union.
She was
The one who got the special permission, and then the judge overturned it or whatever. That whole thing. Yeah, she was at State of the Union. They talked about her.
Oh,
I missed that part. Yeah. Well, her story stuck with me because it just made me absolutely weep and sob at my computer. Because I couldn't
Cox,
understand.
I think is her name.
Yeah, I
don't remember her name, but I'm going to believe you. We do have the internet though. But yeah, I just was like, it just to know that there is absolutely no reason your body has to go through this for a baby who is not going to make it, who is not going to even survive for more than like 30 minutes maximum. And
it's going to be a very short, very painful life.
Yeah.
No matter how long it lives.
She had to deliver it.
I want to say C-section, but like she was the entire time she said, I know this is going to happen. But for those brief 30 minutes, she had all the hope in the world. And she was just like, if there's anything, if either it was her or another mother who went through this, I'm hoping I'm not getting my stories mixed up. But yeah, it just cut me to my core.
A lot of these stories are just heartbreaking. And the fact is that you could pick and choose pieces of a story, and you could probably apply it to almost any of the stories that are happening around the country right now with the way that these things are going. It's fucking crazy.
And in many other
areas of the world as well that never had access or also had their access repealed. So yeah, to all the women out there, we love you so much and we're with you. Ruth is with you in heaven.
Ruth is definitely with you. So Ledbetter versus Goodyear was another case. And so here the situation was that a woman got paid less than her male counterparts. There was no surprise there. But she found this out after she had stopped working there already. So she sued them to try and get that equal compensation paid out. Basically, just pay me the difference.
Yeah.
She had worked at Goodyear for 19 years, and she had consistently been given poor performance reviews and claimed it was gender discrimination to keep her from moving up in the company.
Yeah.
The initial jury awarded her $3.5 million when they made their decisions. When the case went to the district court, they reduced this down to $360,000.
I wonder what the justification
for that. Yeah. What is their justification for that? What do they provide any reasoning, or is that also behind closed doors?
So Goodyear's problem I guess this is and that's kind of the issue, is that Goodyear's issue with this was that Lily Ledbetter had been granted on the basis of her entire career, and they only wanted the one review within the last 180 days considered, because they only considered those cases brought within those 180 days of the discriminatory conduct. So basically, she got her last review within 180 days, and that's the only review that we're paying attention to. So that's just one case instead of 19 years of bad reviews and 19 years of discriminatory conduct.
Oh, then girl,
Bring up 19 years worth of cases.
So with only the last review in mind, it was super easy to justify the lack of equal pay for a performance raise, because it didn't indicate a longstanding pattern and could just be like, they could just say, well, she didn't have a good year. Like she had a bad year this year. And this just happened with my boss, where like they sat there and basically said to everyone that they were mediocre and that like they didn't believe in giving anyone 5-star reviews, because it was impossible to get that good. And then after they gave everyone a mediocre score, they said, by the way, your pay raises are going to be based on merit and based on these scores. By the way, now that we've already given you your mediocre scores, it's super fucked up. Anyway, so it didn't indicate a long-standing pattern. It was just, it could be brushed off as she didn't have a good year. So back and forth through the courts it went until it got to the Supremes, and unsurprisingly, they sided with Goodyear.
of course they did.
But Ruth Ginsburg dissented.
On her state of
Justice?
She dissented, and she called the majority's ruling out of tune with the realities of wage discrimination and, quote, a cramped interpretation of Title VII, incompatible with the statute's broad remedial purpose, quote. She suggested that, quote, the legislature may act to correct this court's parsimonious reading of the Title VII. In fact, it got under Ruth's skin so much that she spent the next few years working with Congress on the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act.
Okay.
And that, I think, happened under Obama. They were really
Oh, I
excited
didn't
about that.
realize
We were all the way up there.
And to this day, I don't think it really has reached all across the nation.
No.
Yeah, absolutely not. There was a time when I worked at a certain coffee
There's
shop,
ways to get around it for sure.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
even back, but probably, well, it was 2016, and I was a supervisor making $10.30 an hour.
and I had more
Supervisor experience than a male supervisor who was more recently hired, and he was getting a full $1 more an hour at least.
Yep.
and I'm just like,
I was pissed.
Oh, I believe it.
I was so
Pissed.
All right. So we've got the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act, which to this day, not everyone has seen the fruits of,
yeah,
which is very sad.
isn't it?
No. I don't know how to make it.
All those women.
There we go. We're shaking her head. I don't know how to do that.
Yeah. All those women who could have helped support the economy with the extra money that they were morally owed.
Owed. Yeah.
Thank you.
A decade after her first bout with cancer, Ruth got pancreatic cancer.
My God.
God, give this woman a fucking break. She's training. He said, like a Navy SEAL or something.
Let's see. Yeah, it's like an ex-special forces or something. Yeah, ex-special forces
Forces.
reservist.
Wow. And pancreatic.
Had a cancer went, hey, bitch.
Well, because she already had cancer, this is a devastating one. So this can be fatal in like months.
Yeah.
But she had already been having regular screenings, so the doctors caught it early and they removed it in surgery.
Good. Good.
The surgery was scheduled for when the bench was in recess, and then 10 days after her release from the hospital, she was back to work with everyone else. She didn't miss a day.
Girl is a
Fucking icon of
I know.
stability, strength, and perseverance.
She's 76 at that point.
I'm an awe. Damn.
So Around this time, Ruth has provided a little bit of relief because Sonia Sotomayor joins the Supremes.
Mm-hmm.
She joins in 2009, and since then, there have always been at least 2 women on the bench.
All right.
Quote, she welcomed me to the court with a warmth I could not have expected, and I came to feel a special kinship with her. She was someone whose wisdom, kindness, and unwavering support I could always rely on. I will forever cherish the moments we shared.
Oh, besties.
Sorry. Yeah, they were good friends. I think she really tried to develop those types of relationships with like everyone that she worked
Which
with.
is so important.
And we heard Sandra Day O'Connor when she would be having people over for dinners and, invited them all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Soon after this, devastation hit. Again,
Mm-hmm.
Marty got cancer.
Marty!
He got cancer
Okay.
again. This is his second bout with cancer.
Yeah.
But he lost his battle and he died in June of 2010.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, Marty, you were a real one.
Yeah, pour one out for Marty, man.
Everybody.
And he liked to say often he was a lucky man marrying Ruth and joining her on her journey to the Supremes.
Ah! Oh, that's
Just, I know, I'm sorry, listeners. You keep hearing me go, yeah, you had a wonderful man. He was lucky to have you. You were lucky to have him, Ruth. I love you both. Dance together in heaven forever.
Nevertheless, she persisted.
yes,
and she went right back to court.
she did. Bad bitch.
She said that he would not have wanted her to miss a day of work.
No.
He knew how important it was.
Yeah, he knew where her heart was.
Yeah.
He came second. By the very early 2010s, she had established her values and patterns of agreement and dissent.
Mm-hmm.
In the cases where justices dissented, they normally began their dissents with, I respectfully dissent. Ruth didn't have time for no pleasantries. She would just say, I dissent. And then she would get on with the reasons for her dissent.
All right, good.
Straight to the point, no mincing words.
And by this time, she had her specific jabot for when she was in the majority and a specific jabot for when she dissented. And that one became quite famous around 2014.
I see.
Very interesting. I like it.
That was when the Tumblr account Notorious RBG came around.
This is when the
actual
This
nickname.
was when she was memeified and forever cemented in history as an icon.
Absolutely
True.
Quote from Anthony Kennedy, in our court sessions and conferences, Ruth was remarkably well prepared for every case, down to the smallest detail. If the two of us disagreed, it was always in a civil, principled, respectful way.
Yeah.
By her learning, she taught devotion to the law. By her dignity, she taught respect for others and her love for America. By her reverence for the Constitution, she taught us to preserve it and secure our to secure our freedom. Okay, this next case I'm way too stupid to understand.
I have no hope
for myself.
But this is the one that like made her well, and this is the quote, this was the case that basically kind of made her like who she's known as today.
Yeah.
So it was called Shelby County v. Holder. And the case was about the revision of voting rights and whether certain amendments made other amendments unconstitutional. Now, this is one of many cases I'm too stupid to understand, like I said, but the majority decided that yes, Shelby County was raising a valid issue and that is indeed unconstitutional. But Ruth and 3 other justices disagreed. I'm just, again, going to read the summary for the dissent and hope someone else in the audience can understand this better than me. So, quote, she argued that Congress's power to enforce the 14th and 15th Amendments encompass legislative action such as the Voting Rights Act. The precedent support Congress's authority. Okay, the legislative history and the text of the amendments, as well as the previous judicial precedent, support Congress's authority to enact legislation that specifically targets potential state abuses. However, Congress does not have unlimited authority, but must show that the means taken rationally advance a legitimate objective, as is the case with the Voting Rights Act. Sufficiently proved that there was still a current need to justify the burdens placed on the states in question. She also argued that by holding Section 4 unconstitutional, the majority's opinion makes it impossible to effectively enforce Section 5. Justice Breyer, Justice Sotomayor, and by that time they had Elena Kagan, all of them joined in the dissent.
Okay.
I think basically it was like the way that you're trying to draw these voting rights acts and the way these laws are happening, you can do this thing that is kind of maybe racist and sexist. But I don't know. Again, it had to do with Voting Rights Act. It had to do with Amendments 14 and 15, and she got famous for it. And I don't understand it for the fucking life of me. I tried so hard to figure out what this was about. My brain broke. Are you looking it up?
What was the name of the case?
Shelby County v. Holder.
Okay.
County
Holder summary. In its decision,
the Supreme Court invalidated on constitutional grounds Section 4B of the Voting Rights Act, which provided the formula for determining which jurisdictions were covered under Section 5. I don't know if that really helped.
I think it basically had to do like with who can vote, and a lot of that and maybe Section 5 there was like a racist clause in there, and Section 4 just I don't know. I don't understand.
Do you think the Supreme Court's decision said that counties and states and places is it like gerrymandering?
I want to say it has to do with stuff like gerrymandering.
Districts?
Yeah, drawing
which is
districts.
Still a problem today.
Oh, for sure. I think that's what it had to do with. That is as closely as I could understand it. I think it had to do with that.
And so
if that's what it's talking about, then it sounds like the Supreme Court said no to Section 4B of the votes.
Wait.
Meaning you can continue to gerrymander.
And she dissented
unconstitutional to try and limit this, and she was like, "Nah, that's not right."
That sounds like
RBG. Okay.
The fact that Congress is gathering to determine whether to renew the Voting Rights Act is more proof that we need to be looking at this more clearly. The fact that it's still in a question means that there are still states that think that people shouldn't be allowed to vote.
Yeah, and we know a lot
of those states. I know South Carolina at least is one of them.
Alabama.
Oh, they
do it. Texas for sure does it. I'm sure. I mean, every state probably has counties that do this. So it can't just be those specific states. But I mean, it is much more common, I think.
Yep.
At least from what I can understand.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so
all right.
So this case, for some reason, is the big catalyst for her cultural phenomenon, right? The notorious RBG Tumblr page.
Oh.
They create this and they're like, "You queen, you go girl." And so now on the internet, her dissents suddenly are being discussed all over the place. Her jabbets are being turned into stickers on every other woman's back bumper.
Yeah.
We literally have her bobblehead joining us. Yes, we have her bobblehead joining us today as we record this episode.
Yeah, we have amazing artwork out there on the notorious RBG Tumblr page right now.
Exactly. This is a whole thing. She became an icon. And
yes.
And literally, as I was writing this episode, this bobblehead nodded back at me every time I screamed and went, "My brain is broken."
She's just like,
"I know, girl. Yep, I know. I lived through it. I got you. It's insane." Mm-hmm. It's just like, don't even get me started.
So from then on, it wasn't just one of three women on a bench. It was notorious RBG writing the dissents, and people started listening. This was actually starting to kind of be when people, like the laymen, started paying attention to the Supreme Court, which was supposed to be another non-celebrity status type thing.
Had there been
like a celebrity status justice before her,
like to this
level?
Oh God, no. Like
Yeah.
not even the first, not even Sandra Day O'Connor, who was the first woman on the bench. Not even she created this much fuss, but it was because of the fact that
Yeah.
by 2014 they had the internet and they had the exact age of Tumblr where you could go on a rant about this and make it a whole phenomenon. Ba ba da da da. Phenomena. Ba ba da ba.
Banana.
Ring, ring, ring.
Ring, 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 ring. Banana phone.
Oh
Ooh,
my
you good?
God. Oh, whoosh, way back in the memory mobile. Holy fuck.
I was gonna what, banana phone?
Ring, 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 ring,
Oh,
ring,
yeah.
ring, ring, banana phone. Oh my God.
Yeah.
That was when I was a teacher's aide in preschool,
Oh yeah.
we used to sing that all the time.
I loved
It. It was, I only heard it in like high school. I did not know Rafi or any of his songs. And I found out about it through the Harry Potter Puppet Pals.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
stuff like that.
So yeah. Ooh, the good old days of the internet. They're still decent days, but this was just a weird time. High school, early days of YouTube.
Around this time, another case came around. It was called Burwell v. Hobby Lobby Stores. Do you remember this?
I know
Hobby Lobby is controversial,
Do you know why?
and I'm not a fan of them for the owners and homophobic policies that he used to have. Is that it?
I mean, he does have them, absolutely.
or that he's,
Is that why they're famous?
but I don't know if he.
Put that into his business. I don't know. I just know that my mom always told me, and I found out through the news that he puts a lot of money, or they put a lot of money towards like anti LGBTQ plus IA plus policies and PACs and practices and trying to lobby for things like that.
Yes. The Green family is a large and a very powerful evangelical Christian family based out of Oklahoma City. They buy cheaply made craft items from China, import them, and sell them at a massive markup. And they're known for fabrics, flowers, decor, framing services. For a couple of years, I even worked for them as a framer.
Yeah, I had no idea.
Idea they imported all that stuff from China.
So when you're a full-time employee for Hobby Lobby, usually there are health benefits of some sort as the little benefits package, right? Health insurance usually covers birth control.
Yeah.
Usually should.
The Green family, being religious nutbags, were like, we don't believe in birth control, and we don't think we should have to provide it for our employees who may or may not share our exact religious beliefs.
I
Want to deck you in the face.
When the Affordable Care Act was passed, it required that employment-based group plans provide some sort of FDA-approved contraceptives. So the Green family sued the Secretary of Health and Human Services, Kathleen Sebelius, on the grounds that the requirement violated the free exercise clause of the First Amendment.
Oh, I don't think I was paying attention at this time, but I am definitely furious right now.
I was paying attention at this time because I'd already worked for them, and then I ended up working for the family again for a little while in a different way. Around the time that this was happening, and it was like
you were like, this affects my life.
It kind of did.
Yeah.
Oh, damn.
Yeah. Luckily, I had an IUD before I started working for them, so
Very
smart choice.
So back and forth and back and forth and back and forth it went. The Green family tried to get money. It was a no-go. The issues were mostly that the exempt companies from this requirement were religious organizations or they were nonprofit businesses. And Hobby Lobby is neither.
Yeah, it's most
definitely for profit, for sure.
Yeah. But they model their business on Christian values, which is to them the same thing.
But they do not
deliver Christian value services like preaching and sermons.
Yeah, but they went for the old, like, corporations are people too kind of strategy.
They're not. What?
But it worked. The majority decision was yes, corporations are considered people in this regard.
Why? The hand
of confusion. I'm waving my hand around with utter confusion because I don't understand how corporations are humans in this fucking country. But okay.
Yeah.
To get on with the
podcast, I'm accepting it and moving on.
I will
not hold up the hard work you've put into this script.
No, it shouldn't be. Corporations are not people, and they shouldn't have the ability to like force the type of care or coverage that you receive. But also, that also perfectly fits into the corporations are not people, and you shouldn't have to rely on corporations to have health insurance for humans.
Yeah, that also is
so dumb.
Your coverage should not be tied to your employment. It never should have been tied to your employment.
No, it
should not have.
All right. So the court though is split. So the majority happens, but it is it's like a 5-4 split, I think. And Ruth is on the minority side. She's like, I'm not standing for this. So I dissent. And she says, quote, the majority's decision was precluded by the court's decision in Employment Division, Department of Human Resources of Oregon v. Smith, in which the court held that there is no violation of the freedom of religion when an infringement on that right is merely an incidental consequence of an otherwise valid statute. Basically, like,
you wanted to run a business.
If this is just incidental to like the values of the business, then we can't. If it wasn't actually designed around violating this, that, there's no point. Additionally, the judicial precedent that states that religious beliefs or observances must not impinge on the rights of third parties, as the sought-after exemption would do to women seeking contraception in this case. Justice Ginsburg also wrote that the majority opinion misconstrued the Religious Freedom Restoration Act as a bold legislative statement with sweeping consequences. Because for-profit corporations cannot be considered religious entities, the burden the respondents claim is not substantial, and the government has shown a sufficiently compelling interest. Justice Ginsburg argued that the contraception mandate does not violate the RFRA, or the Religious Freedom Restoration Act.
And I
wholeheartedly agree.
Yeah, exactly. You shouldn't be denying these people, because if you are trying to get it on the basis of being free to practice your own religion via the First Amendment, that's exactly the thing that should also tell you that you can't control what anyone else tries to do.
I also wonder
if the right to privacy is also being violated there, but maybe not.
Oh, God. Oh, I mean, I'm sure, but
yeah,
it was
almost like
you're forcing people who are sexually active but not married
to either abstain or risk pregnancy.
Yes,
and then
absolutely.
Everybody will know because you.
Absolutely.
Anyway,
Absolutely.
It's very possible. It's not. It's a stretch, but I think it's
tentative.
It's a very tentative little string there of just another consequence
also,
of this. Yeah.
It's absolutely also a consequence of that, for sure. Like, not even incidentally, it is the next logical step that happens. Because guess what? People are still going to have sex if they can't have contraception. They're still going to get pregnant, and people are still going to get men are still going to be horrible people, and as a species, and they're going to rape women, and they're going to get pregnant, and especially in states where women's rights are stripped down to the bare fucking knuckles. It's more important than ever.
Yes.
Anyway. All right.
And we
know this in hindsight now because we've seen a post Roe v. America now. We are seeing like the heartbreaking story we already mentioned about that woman in Texas who was at the State of the Union, where it's all these horrifying infant mortality rates go up. You know, mothers are more likely to die now in pregnancy and things like that.
Absolutely, 1,000%.
Ruth, help another wonderful, amazing justice get to your seat.
In November of 2014, Ruth started feeling some discomfort in her chest while training at the gym.
Okay.
Round 3 of cancer.
After getting checked out, they placed a stent in her right coronary artery, and it seemed to provide a lot of relief. Because by this point, there are a lot of cases that I'm going to cover with the other female Supremes that we'll talk about in the future, I'm going to finally stop talking about law for a second.
Okay.
Okay.
Because Ruth as a person and as an icon was way bigger than the cases by this point. She had been doing tours and she'd been doing lectures and graduation speeches. She even had a soft spot in her heart for officiating weddings.
Oh.
Especially gay weddings.
Oh, God, could you love her more?
She was interviewed for shows and she had a surprising delight at being memeified.
See, and she knows how to take
Jokes and roll
She
with
thought it was hilarious. She was like, this is so funny.
She doesn't take herself too seriously.
Yep. Everyone who met the woman said she was an absolute delight to be around, patient, kind, pensive, funny as hell when you gave her the chance to speak.
I do remember
She was wickedly funny if she like had a clap back for something.
Uh-huh. David Souter said Ruth Ginsburg was one of the members of the court who achieved greatness before she became a great justice. I loved her to pieces. Gary met her, and he says the same thing. He's like, I've never met a nicer woman. Oh yeah, he met her and Sotomayor. Got to sit and talk with him for a couple minutes, and yeah, he was like, it's to this day, it's like the happiest day of his life.
I also love Gary more now. I already
He's
loved
a
Gary,
nerd.
but now I'm like, oh hell yeah, Gary! I'm glad you got to meet her.
What a nerd. Elena Kagan said, as an attorney, she led the fight to grant women equal rights under the law. As a judge, she did justice every day, working to ensure that this country's legal system lives up to its ideals and extends its rights and protections to those once excluded. And in both roles, she has held to, indeed exceeded, the highest standards of legal craft. Her work was as careful as it was creative, as disciplined as it was visionary. It will endure for as long as Americans retain their commitment to law.
Amen.
Amen. When marriage became legal for LGBTQ people, she officiated a number of weddings for couples who couldn't get married before.
That makes me so happy.
While Obama was in office, a fair few people asked her about her retirement.
What'd she say?
She was still doing well. Her brain was still as sharp as ever, so she just didn't give it any mind. She was like, this is fine. Her fellow justices admired the fuck out of her, and even when they weren't on the same side of the political spectrum, they still respected her opinion. This is from Clarence Thomas, quote, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Ruth and I first met when I began my tenure on the DC circuit in 1990. With the exception of the brief period between our respective appointments to the Supreme Court, we have since been judicial colleagues. Through the many challenges, both professionally and personally, she was the essence of grace, civility, and dignity. She was a superb judge who gave her best and exacted the best from each of us, whether in agreement or disagreement. And as outstanding as she was as a judge, she was an even better colleague, unfailingly gracious, thoughtful, and civil.
That's the only time
I'll say Clarence Thomas was right about something.
Samuel Alito, quote, Justice Ginsburg will go down as a leading figure in the history of the court. She will be remembered for her intelligence, learning, and remarkable fortitude. She has been and will continue to be an inspiration for many. And then Trump got elected.
Oh, the dark year. That I still remember that night.
Oh, I do too.
I was drinking White Russians nervously 6 inches from my TV, and I just couldn't. It was a dark night for half of the country.
Hillary was still ahead when I went to sleep, and then I woke up in the middle of the night, and it was literally like a waking nightmare. Like, I learned that Trump had gotten it, and I woke up in the middle of the night because my neighbors, the Suarezes, their car had been set on fire. Yeah, it was bad.
What the fuck?
They were a Mexican family. Who cares if they were here legally?
Like the
Trump
fact that somebody's
won!
willing. Yeah, but just because Trump won an election, you went and set someone's fucking car on fire.
Hannah, Oklahoma, in the 2016 election, Oklahoma was the only state that did not have a single blue district.
Yeah, that's
It's a state my mom, okay. Oklahoma, I've always been known to just be like, keep this in the back of your mind. My mom
It's
said you can
horrible.
go. Yeah, she just said this one very simple sentence, told me everything I needed to know. She told me you can go to school out of the country. You could go to any state you want, except you're not going to school in Oklahoma.
The worst
and I was
state.
like,
Okay. She was fine with Louisiana. She didn't mind if I was going to go to school in Missouri, but it was like Oklahoma, fuck no.
There's literally nothing interesting about Oklahoma.
I'm sure there's got to be.
Be some.
I lived there for 4 years, and that was 2 years too long. I got a degree, and I should have been out that day.
Look, I will say
There's got to be something interesting about Oklahoma, because if there's at least one interesting thing in Nebraska, then there's got to at least be two interesting things in Oklahoma.
Anyway,
That's how we feel about Oklahoma. Sorry, guys.
Trump got elected, and it fucking sucked. And Ruth realized once he was in office that she couldn't retire now, because if she did, Trump would just replace her with some bullshit.
yeah, she hung on.
For us.
She did.
Yes.
And then in 2018, Ruth fell in her offices. Her teeny, tiny, old, frail body falling was a very traumatic event, and it busted 3 of her ribs.
Oh my God, I'm
Literally about to cry.
I know.
Sorry, I got that little sting in your nose and your eye starts to
Mhm.
water. She fell. Oh God.
She fell and
This
she got
tiny
really
woman.
hurt.
Oh.
Even though she was back at work, just a couple of days later, the CT scan of her ribs while she was at the hospital showed cancerous nodules on her lungs.
Oh my God.
So again, she has cancer.
This is round 3.
For the first time in her career, she missed work to deal with cancer. She had a left lung lobectomy in December and was back at work with the court at the end of February 2019.
Man, she
just doesn't stop working, does she?
Neil Gorsuch. For 40 years, Ruth served the American people as one of our most distinguished judges. Her sacrifices for the country were many, but always performed with honor. We are blessed by the happy memories that will remain, like traveling with Ruth to London, where, to her delight, an uninformed guide kept calling her Ruth-y, or all the opera she tried so valiantly to teach me, or her sweet tooth at lunch, or the touching stories of her remarkable life with Marty.
Oh my God,
what a lovely statement. You got to really know a little bit of
the little memories from the fellow justices I really wanted to put in here. These are all of their comments from her obituary. Basically, when they all do their statement, they all gave comments. So I'm reading those.
Yeah,
I would say though his is, I think, my favorite.
Yeah, it's very cute because it shows you guys went and did stuff. You had fun. You did your life, and then also there's cute little
her personality.
I would have called her Ruth-y too, but I love that someone pointed out that someone didn't know, but they shouldn't have called her that.
Yeah. I would say it's
just like her personality, that she's trying to teach him opera. I found that very cute.
Months later, the court made an announcement that Ruth had undergone extensive treatment for pancreatic tumor.
Oh, back at the
pancreas.
We're back at the
pancreas again.
Yep. She was declared cancer-free in January 2020, but by the next month, it had come back. In May, she was asked about her energy levels and ability to continue on. She assured the press that she was fully capable of doing her job and, quote, would remain a member of the court as long as I can do the job full steam.
I really think God
just wanted to meet her, and he kept trying to bring her up. And she said, no, I have work to do. And so she stayed down. No, not yet.
Brett Kavanaugh, quote, no American has ever done more than Justice Ginsburg to ensure equal justice under the law for women. She was a cherished colleague, and she inspired me and all of us with her unparalleled work ethic and devotion to the law. A meticulous and path-marking judge, she held herself to the highest standards of precision and accuracy in her beautifully crafted opinions, and she inspired all of us to try and meet those same exacting standards. I learned from her principled voice and marveled at her wonderful wit at our weekly conferences and daily lunches. Justice Ginsburg paved the way for women to become lawyers and judges. She made it possible for women and girls like my daughters to compete on equal footing as student athletes.
That was very nice of you.
Brett, thank you.
So she's losing the battle with cancer, and by this point, everyone knows it. But this is a fucking vital moment in the nation's political landscape, right? We're in 2020. It's an election year.
Tense.
It's Biden v. Trump, and she knows the full weight of what is coming in like mid-September, right?
Mhm.
She knows what's coming in November, but in mid-September, Ruth told her granddaughter and her doctor, quote, "My most fervent wish is that I will not be replaced until a new president is installed," end quote.
Yeah.
So that's the middle of September. And then on the 18th of September, 2020,
No.
Ruth Bader Ginsburg died from cancer.
No.
From like the fourth cancer or fifth cancer of her life.
No.
She fought it so many times. It's fucking crazy.
She trained hard.
She fought hard. She
Worked hard.
So the statement of Chief Justice John G. Roberts Jr., this is the initial announcement. Our late nation has lost a jurist of historic nature, of historic stature. We at the Supreme Court have lost a cherished colleague. Today we mourn, but with confidence that future generations will remember Ruth Bader Ginsburg as we knew her, a tireless and resolute champion of justice. I think this is my favorite, though. So Stephen Breyer is also Jewish. His little obit says, "I heard of Ruth's death while I was reciting the mourner's Kaddish at Rosh Hashanah service. I thought, a great justice, a woman of valor, a rock of righteousness, and my good, good friend. The world is a better place for her having lived in it, and so is her family, her friends, her legal community, the legal community, and the nation." It's just a little poem that he wrote for her.
Oh yeah. I honestly don't think it could be
better said because she touched so many lives, both personally and even, without ever seeing
her
or
legal
knowing
reach.
any of us.
Yep.
Yeah.
To try and set precedent for all of us in the future. Her body was held in the Great Hall of the Supreme Court, and her family and fellow justices were able to pay their private respects. Rabbi Richard Jacobs said, quote, "One of the themes of Rosh Hashanah suggests that very righteous people would die at the very end of the year because they were needed until the very end." Thousands gathered outside her death to lay candles, flowers, photos, and countless messages. Following the private ceremony, and because of COVID-19 restrictions, her body was taken outside to the court's portico so members of the public could pay their respects.
Yeah.
Thousands and thousands of people lined up over 2 days to visit and pay their respects.
I would have if I
could have afforded the travel.
They then moved her body into the Capitol, where she was the first woman and the first Jew to lie in state.
Oh wow.
September 29th, Ruth rejoined Marty when she was buried next to him in Arlington National Cemetery.
Ruth.
The nation wept. I wept. I remember being really sad.
Same.
This was far more than a loss of a figurehead at this point for a lot of figurehead for policies.
Mhm.
She had become this spiritual icon in the world of feminism.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, every feminist out there who mourned her death also knew what was about to happen.
Yes.
In desecration of that sacred spot on the bench that she had held for so long. And desecrate that bench, he did.
Yeah, he did.
In a remarkable show of dictator-level authority, Donald J. Trump bullied his way through picking and confirming Ruth's replacement, a woman barely known by the name of Amy Coney Barrett.
Yeah.
Literally 2 weeks before Trump lost the presidential election, Amy was confirmed.
God, I remember that.
And boy, has it been rough since.
Yeah, it was scary.
Yeah.
Brett Kavanaugh.
There was a
one
whole
too.
thing about putting off. Yeah, I was going to say there was a whole thing about putting off the appointment of a justice in an election year, even when it was like months and months and months before, like the beginning of an election year versus 6 weeks before an election year. And it was 6 weeks before an election year before the election day that this started. Not even that this was all confirmed. This was when it started, was with her death. Was 6 weeks before they elected.
Yeah, I think we all.
Anyway.
I think a lot of women in America knew, that, like you said, that it was just, this is this is his chance now to.
Yep. And he really he leaned in. But we'll talk about her in a bit. So, Ruth has been the topic of countless awards, posts, conversations. She had a documentary made about her that was absolutely iconic. She's been inducted in the Women's Hall of Fame. She was named one of the 100 most powerful women. She's been named Woman of the Year. Time named her a 100 most influential people. She's been awarded honorary degrees by 30 universities, including every Ivy League school and a few Jewish schools. In 2009, she received a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Scribes, the American Society of Legal Writers. Her face is on a stamp.
Yes.
And a praying mantis was named after her for 2 reasons.
Ooh, I love that.
Oh, it's fucking great. So 1, the mantis was the first to be identified by the female genitalia, not the male, the female genitalia. And 2, there's a little marker around their necks that looked like Ruth's jabbets.
Oh, and the fun fact is the praying mantis is my all-time favorite bug.
It's called the Ilomantis ginsbergae.
Oh, Ilomantis ginsbergae.
I am ignoring a massive amount of tributes to her because the pop culture section for this woman is one of the longest I've ever seen. But all of this to say, 2 giant episodes to say, this woman fought tooth and nail for women's rights. And in the years after her death, all of that work has been slashed and slashed and slashed. And I think personally, she would be fucking rolling in her grave if she learned what the court has done for reproductive rights since her death.
And you know that Marty
is a supportive husband. He'd be rolling too.
I know, they'd be rolling together. But the world as a whole will never forget her work and the importance in history. And when we go back, when we finally are able to claw some of our reproductive rights back, it will be partly because she helped pave the way.
And you know who probably feels
so fucking stupid?
That dean
who asked what the hell she was doing in college.
I know. I think about that. I thought about that so much of I wonder how long he was in law after that to see her get all the way to the bench. Or was he dead by that time? Did he just see her get to be a judge and was like, well, my other students were also judges, so it's really not a big deal? Or did he actually live long enough to see her go, oh, she fucking made it?
I hope so, just so his worldview is shattered.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Guys,
I don't know if I could love Ruth Bader Ginsburg any more than I already do.
Yes,
you're the best, Ruth. We love you. I am grateful for all of your work every single day.
She may be dead, but nevertheless, her spirit persists.
Yes.
All right, that has been a really long 2-episode fucking podcast about Ruth goddamn Bader Bobble Ginsburg.
Ruth Bader
Ginsburg,
notorious RBG.
Dun dun dun. Dun 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 dun.
And she comes out with boxing gloves.
And cut on at 5 foot, trying to be 1 inch, 115 pounds of pure sass. We got Ginsburg.
Exactly.
And she knows she's waiting for Trump to die so she can get the first punch in.
It can't come soon enough, honestly.
I know.
I don't like to say that about people. I really don't like to wish them harm, but his death cannot come soon enough. It will solve just a mountain of headaches for
just
millions and millions and millions of people.
Yeah, I don't judge you for feeling that way because I don't want to wish him death either. But I wouldn't be upset.
I'll just say that.
I will be happy the day that happens. I will very much celebrate it for sure. Anyway, but we're not talking about that. This has been a fucking podcast about Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Yes, thank you all
so much for listening. You can find us at Well Behaved Women Pod or Well Behaved Women Podcast on almost any social network. I am still checking Threads just in case.
Yes, let us know how, if you wanted to get in contact with us and suggest more episodes, let us know. We'd love to hear from you. And like and subscribe wherever you're finding your podcast, because we're not quite sure where all we are. But we'd love to hear from you. And yeah.
Awesome.
Well, thank you, Lauren, so much. I love RBG, and I can't wait to see your next script.
I'm just gonna say our next regular episodes, guys, is gonna be rough.
Okay,
It's not gonna be
rough.
it's not gonna be super fun for the
We
first
need our
little bit.
big book of insults.
We can do
We
that.
can get
or
the
if we
big
need
book
some
of
jokes,
insults.
we can get some jokes. We'll figure it out.
palate cleansers.
But thank you. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.